Hi, everybody. I'm back. I'm Barbara Ali, and I'm a passion and purpose coach. And I am delighted today to be with one of my favorite people in my pocket, which means that I listen to his podcast all the time, Nick Loper. Welcome, Nick.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for having me.
Oh, I think you're awesome. And I love what you do to help the world survive and have a much better quality of life. So let me tell you a little bit about Nick. Nick Loper helps people earn money outside of their day job. He is an author, online entrepreneur, and host of the award-winning Side Hustle Show podcast, which features new part-time business ideas each week. As the chief side hustler at sidehustlernation.com, he loves deconstructing the tactics and strategies behind building extra income streams. So we're going to talk about how you can escape the rat race.
All right, let's do it.
All right, Nick. First of all, since this is all about finding purpose, I have to ask, so do you feel like you are living your purpose right now?
I feel very blessed to enjoy the work that I do every day because I started out kind of asking a lot of the questions I would turn around and ask the audience, like, well, what do you never get tired about talking about? What do you want to be known for when somebody Googles you? What really lights you up? And I just got a kick out of deconstructing these different business ideas. Like, well, hold on. Where did the money come from? How did you get your first customers? How did you come up with that idea? All that stuff. Love it. Loved it in 2013 and still do today. I still think it's a blast, and to be able to broadcast that out and have the impact that it's had, I feel really grateful to be able to have turned that into my job.
That is amazing, because so many people during the pandemic, they had a lot of time to think about what they were going to do with their lives. And I saw a lot of podcasts just fall off the face of the earth. And yet you just dug in deeper and found some of the best content probably on the planet right now for people who want to create a business. So I think that's incredible that you keep doing it.
I don't know if I got another 500 episodes in me, but it's been almost 9 years, and I'll keep doing it as long as it's fun and rewarding and challenging. I mean, the exciting thing is I learn new stuff every day. So it's like, that's what keeps it fresh.
That's great. I think you have a natural curiosity and you follow that to the deepest level.
For sure. Yeah, I don't think you could fake that. It's like, well,
No.
slow down a second. You just said, I don't know. But yeah, for sure.
Yeah, and somehow you manage to get more information out of your guests that I think other people, even the people you interview, I don't think they realize that they're going to say what they are going to say. So that's really great that you can do that. It's like magic.
Jedi mind tricks or something. I don't know.
Exactly. So we thought we would ask you today about creativity and how that plays in creating ideas. I mean, where do you find these ideas? Are they really ninja mind tricks, or what do you have as far as creative ways to come up with ideas?
Yeah, lots of different ways to go about it. And we can kind of, explore some different frameworks in that sense. One of my favorite frameworks in that sense is called Rip, Pivot, and Jam. And it comes from the guys who host the Tropical MBA podcast, which is one of the very first podcasts that I started listening to. And so their model was rip, basically like copy somebody else's business idea, pivot it to a different industry niche, target audience, whatever, and then jam, like go do the work, go hustle and make that happen. And so one personal example of that was I was working on one of my many failed side hustles was this wine related site that had no reason to exist. I don't know anything about wine. I don't really care about wine, but for whatever reason, I thought this would be a good idea. While I was doing research for that site, I came across this site that was reviewing wine clubs, and they had cool little star ratings, and they had these affiliate links to go out where they would earn commission if you ended up joining this wine club through this site. I was like, well, that's a really cool model. Like, what else could I pivot that to, right? Mm-hmm. And something that came to mind out of my own personal pain points was this world of hiring and working with virtual assistants. And I needed some help in other business that I was running at that time, but didn't really know where to go, especially at the beginning. I don't really want somebody to come over and work at my kitchen table. And, that just seems weird. How do, which of these companies are legit? How does it work? So many questions about that. And so I ended up putting together this directory and review platform called Virtual Assistant that, in its very early days was almost a direct copy of that wine club review site. And that was like my pitch to the, Odesk developer at the time. Like, can you use this theme? And instead of making it about wine, like I'll fill in the blanks to make it about outsourcing and virtual assistants. It was like, sure, we could do that, $100, $150, we're off to the races. And so that was one real life example of applying that, rip pivot jam framework. Ended up selling that site in late 2020 after, 9+ years of running it. But it was a really cool project to have a pulse on this industry and be a part of it.
That's something that I'd love to go back to. You talk about failed business attempts. I think we all have to have those in order to find success. So, I mean, how do you know when to go forward? It seems like you're pretty fearless and you've tried so many things. You're obviously not afraid of failure. What advice do you have for people who aren't sure if their idea is going to work?
Yeah, failure definitely still stings. And I think you get better at it the more swings that you take. So I don't know if there's any way around it instead of just like, well, you got, as long as you minimize your downside and the upside is strong enough that it would erase like those losses. If you find something that hits, like it just becomes a matter of taking enough swings. I had a profitable shoe site like that sold, sneakers and all sorts of shoes as on an affiliate basis for Zappos and Amazon. And so that was like my main, my original side hustle in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I remember reading that in your book.
I tried to spin off this like handbag and luggage site because a lot of those same retail partners that I was working with like also had that as a complementary product category on their site. I was like, okay, we can use a lot of the same architecture and processes that we already have, and we'll just spin off into this other niche. Huge flop, like just lower commission rates, and like just failed for a whole host of reasons. It just started to do the wine site, tried to spin off a sandal site. Like, oh, if the shoe niche worked, maybe I can get even nichier and do sandals. And it's like, well, this is lower price point. This is highly seasonal. This is also, a lot of duplicate content from other stuff we were creating. It just, you kind of learn from those mistakes and you dust off. For me, the sign to call it quits is when you come to dread the work. Because the last thing that you need is a second job that you come to resent, that you come to hate. And so it's like, okay, time to spin off into something new there.
That's really good advice. Yeah, when it's not fun anymore, then it's time to cash in the chips and do something different. So I think that's amazing too, that you combined wine with virtual assistants. I mean, that's a real leap.
It is, but it's like the same. It was like the same general framework. Like, okay, we're going to work on an affiliate lead gen model. Here's the architecture that appears to be working pretty well for them. Okay, what's a different niche that we could go into? And especially at that time, and maybe even still today, I think there's a big opportunity in reviewing products that aren't already reviewed 1,000 times on Amazon. And so you've seen people do it with like the direct to consumer brands that maybe don't sell through Amazon. Fin versus Fin is an example that's been on the podcast a couple of times, like writing these in-depth comparison posts on, and they started out with like male pattern baldness products or erectile dysfunction companies or something. Like it was like, hey, that was the niche that they started out with, and they've expanded a bunch since then. And we've seen other guests do the same thing with fitness products, and I think it's kind of a cool way to go. And we're able to kind of leapfrog the traditional long slow slog of building up a blog audience by really targeting those high buyer intent type of keywords.
Right. I think that's great. So for you, it's about structure.
Yeah, and so that's another business model or another common framework, I guess, that we see people doing. Like, okay, if I have some expertise in this niche or an interest in this niche, like, could I create content around that? Be it, blog, podcast, YouTube, Instagram, email, like whatever your audience of choice is or your platform of choice is, go where the target audience is already hanging out. But that's something that we've seen how some other people have success with, for sure.
Yeah, that's really good. That's a great idea. I like just kind of brainstorming what somebody else has already done and then changing it. So if you're gonna do something, let's say that you already have an idea, and you've talked about some of your previous people that you've had on your podcast, that they've had an idea, then they change it up or they scale it. How can you make more money doing what you love to do?
Lots of different ways. I think about this all the time. Like, how do you get paid over and over again from the work that you do once? And for a lot of people who are starting out in the service-based space, the natural inclination is, well, whenever I get booked up, I raise my rates. And I talk to a lot of sellers on the Fiverr marketplace. Like, okay, whenever I'm booked up, that's when I, bump up the prices 20%, 25%, 50% in some cases. Like, hey, if I am still getting booked up, then I keep creeping it up. And that's what my wife and her partner did in their photography business, where they started out at the almost like ridiculously low rates just to build a portfolio and to build their own confidence and get over that imposter syndrome. Oh, we can do this, we can get in the reps. And now, charging probably 10, 20 times what they charged, for an initial wedding. And it's like, hey, it's the same amount of work. But so that's one way to scale. Another interesting way that we've seen people kind of pivot in a way is going from like one-on-one to one-to-many. If there's a way, like if you're doing tutoring, for example, and like, okay, I'm helping one kid at a time study up and get ready for the ACT or the SAT. Like, okay, could I put on a workshop and have 10 people show up? And we had a recent guest who was doing chess coaching, and he was originally starting working as a side hustle. Like, he was a teacher working with the summer camp as a side hustle, $17 an hour, not too bad. But when he started doing it on his own, he like 5x'd his hourly rate because he had 10 or 12 kids coming in and paying him a certain rate per hour. It's like, oh, okay, the light bulb goes off. It's like, okay, doing it this one to many instead. So a couple ways there, and we've got a few more on this list if that makes sense.
Yeah, no, I think it is, because there's, at the end of the day, there's only us, like one person, or then you have to hire someone, you have to hire a VA, or you have to increase your team. And with that comes other headaches. So you have to decide, what can you do just by yourself, first of all, if you can bring in more money. And I think that that's been one of the opportunities of the pandemic, that everybody has gone online. The people who used to do live events, now they can do it on Zoom.
Yeah.
And definitely increase the number of people they're serving.
That's another way, and probably an important point, maybe even from the very onset of your business, to get in that mindset of business owner versus business doer. Like, I want to have a pressure washing company versus I can pressure wash your driveway. I want to have a dog walking company versus I'm going to go walk dogs as a side hustle, because it frees you up to not necessarily be selling your own expertise or skills in that area, but like, oh, now I can play matchmaker and I can play marketer and I can put on my CEO hat and go find other qualified people to go do that work and not get caught in what some people would call like the freelancer's trap. And for some people, the freelancer trap is fine, especially if it's like you're a highly paid freelancer in web development or some other, really sought after skill. You've got some options there.
But at the end of the day, you only have a certain number of hours, and you have to decide how many hours you want to give to your business. So yeah, I like that idea of going in with the mindset that you're the boss instead of the worker.
Yes, trying to. Anyways, I don't know. I painted houses in college, and that was how it was supposed to be set up. Like, oh, I'll hire painters, and I'll just like bid on the jobs, and then the other people will do the work. And I found myself, being nervous about filling the calendar and underbidding a lot of stuff. Like, I really want to get this job, and it's like, okay, well, we can get it done faster and move on to the next house if I hang out and help paint. But it's easier said than done in a lot of ways. But that's how people are getting that done. And I just recorded this morning with a guy doing digital marketing, Facebook ads agency type of work for event centers and car dealers and realtors and all this stuff. And it's like, he had kind of graduated into that business development role, where his primary role was as account manager, and had now somebody on his team who was, setting up the campaigns and like doing the split testing and the analysis and all that stuff on a more granular basis.
Does he enjoy it more? I guess we'll have to wait and hear that episode.
We'll be out probably end of next month, but yeah, it's coming.
Very good. So where do you feel like you are now?
I'm feeling like living the dream in a lot of ways. I still have the stress and anxiety that the to-do list never ends, right?
Yeah.
There's always more experiments and projects that you want to try. And that kind of eats at me in a way. And
Mhm.
I don't know how to combat that. I just read this book called 4,000 Weeks, which was kind of about embracing that joy of missing out and just saying like, look,
Yes.
out of the entire world of possibilities that you could potentially have to do. And social media makes this so much worse because at any given time, somebody's off in Hawaii or somebody else is like starting this other business and you see their highlight reel and you're like, I kind of want to do that. That sounds kind of fun. It's like,
Yeah.
no, like enjoy what you have, enjoy the moment, like focus
Mhm.
on the people and uh, the friends that you have around you versus, constantly chasing the next thing because there's always the next thing. And I don't know, it was helpful to read, but definitely something that I still struggle with.
That's a great book. And that brings up a good point because you have small children, and a lot of people want to work from home now so that they can have more time with their family. Because I think a lot of people felt undervalued at work. So that whole joy of missing out, I think it's a matter of prioritizing what it is that's important for you and then fitting that in around a way to make money. And one of the tips that I've seen you write about and talk about is that you replace your income like 1 gig at a time. You say, okay, now take your cable bill and then let's see what we can do to recreate that amount of money.
Yeah. And the idea here is, obviously you got to tackle it from both sides. Like there's the income side of the equation and there's the expense side of the equation. And I think it makes sense to spend consciously, right? Just, I
Mhm.
don't know who has the budget to just be like, money, whatever, money's money. We'll get
Yeah.
more of it. Like, so spend intentionally, but there's only so much that you can cut. And a lot of personal
Yes.
finance stuff talks about frugal living, and I'm all for it. But there's only so much you can cut. Whereas the income side is potentially limitless. And so I think it makes more sense and it's more fun to focus on that side. But I call it the side hustle snowball, which allows you to celebrate the smaller wins along the way. Because a lot of people will start out and say, well, I need to replace my day job income, or if I can only cover my mortgage, if I can only cover my rent with my side hustle stuff, like, life gets a lot easier. And of
Mhm.
course it does, but
Mhm.
maybe that's not realistic starting out. So trying to itemize out your expenses from smallest to largest and say, okay, well, what can I do to erase that cell phone bill or the car insurance or the gym membership or whatever, these like lower tier items. So you're able to, um, feel some positive progress and hopefully some momentum to keep going.
Right. I think that's great advice because not all of us have the ability. I think the big thing I should say is my husband runs a company, and so he manages the health care and all the benefits. And I think for a lot of us, we tend to stay in a job for those benefits. And then if you can find something on the side that you enjoy doing where you can maybe live out your passion and make a little extra cash, there's a real bonus to that.
Yeah, I don't know how we got ourselves in this convoluted system where insurance is tied to employment. I think you would see
Yes.
an explosion of entrepreneurship if you somehow decoupled those two. But it's
Yeah.
a it's an interesting system for sure.
Yeah. It's different than we see in other places, for sure. Yeah. So how do you think you could be more effective then if you're trying to, do it all?
Stop trying to do it all first. Like try to
Okay,
focus,
great.
focus on those few core priorities. So check out that 4,000 Weeks book and maybe combine that with Indistractable, which is another recent read of mine, where he talks about how, and maybe as a result of the internet and devices, like our attention spans are so short, and like practicing this focus muscle and like blocking it out on your calendar. You decided in advance this was important, and it was important enough to put on your calendar, and so you blocked out this time to make it happen. And recognizing the different triggers that make you want to go check Facebook or go check your email. And I still find myself like, okay, all right, it's blog post time. Let's do this. Let's crank out these 3,000 words. And then like, a couple paragraphs in, it's like, oh, yeah. And I don't have to, like almost all notifications turned off, but oh, I should go check and see what email came in the last 15 minutes. Like just, I don't know, recognizing those triggers and like fighting through that pain and maybe even, closing out of all these different tabs. That's definitely one thing. But focusing on those like key performance indicators, if you already have a business that you're running, like, okay, what's really going to move the needle? How does this get me closer to my goals? And what can I do to influence those numbers on a day-to-day basis so that I make consistent forward progress and momentum toward those instead of all these distractions, all these other things that you could do, but maybe aren't necessarily important, or maybe they feel urgent, but they're not the ones moving the ball forward. So for me, what that looks like is itemizing out my top 3 priorities for the next day, the night before. So I find that gets me in this mindset of, okay, I know exactly what I need to do and in what order when work time starts. So it's not immediately diving into reactive mode, because I can easily kill a half an hour, or more catching up on the, what emails came in overnight, or, try and put out certain fires. And sometimes I'll even do that just on my phone, like first thing in the morning, like, okay, just making sure, nothing blew up overnight. Okay, fine. But then once it's really time to get down to it, okay, this is what I said was important. So this is what I'm going to work on, and try and, if I can cross those things off in a day, that makes it a huge win. So setting yourself up for success in that way.
That's really great advice. I think the whole idea of reducing distractions, that's something that a lot of people are trying to focus on now with mindfulness practices and just being more disciplined. Like I know when I wrote my first book, I just took myself off of Instagram and Facebook for an entire month just so I could focus. Is that the kind of thing you do too?
I think I admire you for that. On desktop, I do pretty well because I have like the newsfeed eradicator plugin.
Oh, that's a great idea. What is it? Newsfeed eradicator.
Newsfeed eradicator. So I can still get like my notifications and see what's going on in the Side Hustle Nation Facebook group and stuff. And that's how I justify all this stuff. Well, I use it for work, but but it at least stops the endless scroll on desktop. But I still have the stuff on my phone. I tried to bury the app for a while, and that worked for a little bit of time, but just trying to. And so what Indistractable talks about is like recognizing those triggers. And he said, distraction is almost always a turning away from pain in some way. And so it's like, okay, well, what was the pain that I felt? It's like, okay, doing the work was painful, even if it wasn't physically painful, but maybe it was mentally painful in that moment. And so you like, okay, I try and alleviate that pain with a quick dopamine hit of refreshing the feeds and stuff. It's like, I don't know, trying to get better at it, but it's a work in progress for sure.
Oh, I think we all are. Yeah, I had a nurse tell me lately that she feels like everybody just has this big hole inside, especially after the pandemic. And we fill it different ways. Some people become alcoholics. Some people feed themselves with social media. So you have to decide what is it that you want in your heart, which kind of goes back to the whole purpose. I mean, if you find your purpose and you feel like you're living that, maybe the distractions fall aside a little bit more.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I know purpose is like the whole thing of the summit, but I want to throw out a counterpoint is like, if you're trying to come up with a business that is in, full alignment with your purpose, like that's putting a lot of pressure on yourself. And we've had people say, well, I was passionate about music. And so I started this music business, and then it turned into a job, and I turned out to hate music. And I killed my passion by trying to do that. And so
that's a great point.
There's some trade-offs. And another guest, this is Nick Huber from Sweaty Startup, which is a really entertaining podcast about, just put down the laptop for a second. Like, look, there's all these like cool local service businesses that have much less competition. But his point was like, do not under any circumstance start a business around your passion. It's like, if you're passionate about yoga or craft beer or like other people are probably passionate about it too, because it's fun. And when people are passionate about it, they do irrational things like work for free. And that's not a niche that I want to play in.
No.
So just, tread with caution there. Don't put that kind of pressure on yourself to identify this undying passion is what we found in a lot of ways. And there's some research from Dan Pink and Cal Newport to kind of back this up. Passion often follows doing the work. And I think I gave the example of painting houses in college. And not passionate about painting houses, but after a couple of summers of doing it, you can't help notice as you're walking by, like you're looking up under all the eaves and
Yes.
oh, I should scrape that, come back, give this guy an estimate. And the same thing with podcasting. Like I had no passion for podcasting early on. I had no idea what I was doing. It's just, it was something that, I was almost peer pressured into starting. But over the course
Is that
of,
right? I'd love to hear the story about that. How did you get into podcasting and would you recommend it?
I still am bullish on podcasting. It's more crowded now than it was, in almost 9 years ago, but it felt crowded then. There were already a bunch of, entrepreneur shows, like Pat Flynn was going strong. David Siteman Garland had The Rise to the Top, and Mixergy was going, and John Lee Dumas had started. And so like, did there need to be another entrepreneur interview podcast? Like it was something that definitely went through my head. But for me, it started out of kind of a spin-off of a personal blog that I had, and like nobody ever read because it was, pictures from our vacation and rants about current events and some like online, some marketing and entrepreneurship stuff, because that's, what I was working on day to day, but no coherent or consistent message for anybody to like stick around and read it. And you eventually start paying attention and, oh, the blogs that tend to do well have a focus. And so, okay, I'm going to niche down. I'm going to be the side hustle guy. And everybody that I was following at the time said, if you want to have a personal brand, you need to have a blog, but you also have to have like podcast or a YouTube channel. YouTube was like the other option, and video was and still is to a certain extent pretty intimidating. So it's like, okay, podcasting is the lesser of two evils. I can probably do this, and I don't have to be the guy. I'll just point the mic at other people and have them tell their story. And that was the thesis, and that ended up working. But that's how that was the impetus for the Side Hustle Show.
That's awesome. I didn't know that whole backstory. That's really interesting too. That do you feel like you still need to have all of the things for a personal brand?
I think it's important to have a home base, like to have your own website, because you see people build, followings on Instagram, TikTok, and these other channels, but they don't have any ownership of that. They're one algorithm change away from getting wiped out or having really limited reach. So the people that we see having the most success there have calls to action to say, come back to my website, sign up for my email list, come over here, buy my thing. It's, it's warm, it's safe. Come over here. Like Tori Dunlap from her first 100K built this huge audience on TikTok, like viral exposure, but she'd laid the foundation first. She'd already been working at her first 100K. Her calls to action were like, come take your free money personality quiz, get on the email list. We're going to guide you in your personal finance journey where you need to go. Similarly, Kat Norton, who's like, does these Excel tutorial dancing videos. And she's like this viral sensation on TikTok and Instagram, but it's the same thing. Like it's one thing to build an audience. It's another thing to have a business behind that. And so she now sells these, really in-depth Excel training courses for kind of the Gen Z millennial audience, and has done incredibly well with it.
That's a really good point. Congratulations to her for doing that. But you have to figure out, just by having followers, there used to be a point where people would be, well, I'll follow you, so you follow me back, so that it'll look like I have a lot of followers. But if you're looking to build a business, that doesn't bring you money.
Right.
Unless you're some, YouTube personality that has a million followers, or maybe it's even more now, where you start building revenue. So you feel like you need to have a website for sure. Do you do all the social media? I mean, I've seen your Instagram posts, but how much time should we spend on that?
Yeah, for me, Instagram is still mostly family stuff. It's like the last bastion of social media that hasn't been taken over by business stuff. So I'd say, and this was Robert Farrington from The College Investor gave this advice on the show recently. He's like, okay, have your blog, or, have the website as kind of your home base, right? Something that you own and have control over. And then, pick one to start with. Maybe it's YouTube, maybe it's TikTok, like maybe it's LinkedIn, like depending on your niche, it might be, any one of these platforms. Maybe it's an email list, maybe it's in-person events, maybe it's guesting on other people's podcasts, right? But having some way to bring people back into your ecosystem and focusing on that until you start to see some traction. and then branching out or even hiring help in other certain areas.
Yeah. Like somebody to do your posts at various, like to do your TikTok videos or your Instagram posts.
Right.
To photograph you and your family on the beach or with your laptop.
What somebody calls it, like your professional follower photographer, just to, I don't know.
Well, you're lucky your wife does that for you.
She's an excellent photographer. We always joke, we see like, people like, try to take their, pictures outside of the hotel or something. And we're like, oh, influencers in the wild.
Yes, that's very true. Yeah. As someone who's traveled widely, I kind of find it annoying that there's always somebody's phone in your face. So yeah, I get that. So what do you do to be more effective? Do you do meditation or journaling, or what does your routine look like for that?
So it starts with that, itemizing out the priorities the night before. I have developed, and hopefully it sticks, kind of this meditation habit so far this year. We haven't missed a day yet.
How do you do it? Can I ask that?
So I use the Muse device, which was this silly and maybe 100% placebo like headband that supposedly measures your brainwaves and connects with this app.
Okay.
And it tells you when you're calm, and like little birds chirp by you when you're calm. And I don't know, what it was for me was a $200 investment in developing this habit, versus before it's like, I don't know, I just couldn't force myself to sit down and actually do it on a consistent basis. And so this is something that has helped with that. And I kind of combine that with because I have a journal entry, like, well, how did you feel during this session? As I kind of use that as a daily recap of, okay, what did I get done? What am I grateful for? Which I think, no matter how crazy the kids are, no matter how much stuff is left on your to-do list, it's kind of lets you celebrate those small wins and take appreciation for some of the good things that did happen.
That's good that you take notice of that. So you're going to keep up the meditation habit then?
Yeah, I've got like 65 days in a row so far, or whatever day of the year we're on. And so it feels like something that has stuck. I don't know. I do well with like streaks and commitment. And I feel, even though it's, 8 out of 10 ain't bad, 9 out of 10 ain't bad, right? Like as long as you're making a habit, and same thing with like diet and exercise, like you're making the effort most of the time, that's still better than nothing. But it's still like something very motivating about not breaking the chain. Does that make sense?
Right. Yes, definitely. Yeah. You don't want to break that string, because once you do, then it could be the whole train car goes over the bridge.
I think James Clear has a thing like, don't miss 2 days in a row. It's like, okay, you don't feel well, you skip the gym. Like, okay, but you better not miss day 2, because then all of a sudden you've given yourself permission to really slide. So get back on, start again.
So where do your best ideas come from? Do they come during meditation, in the shower? Do you go in nature? I mean, you have a lot of ideas, because you're running like 7 or 8 side hustles at a time, aren't you?
Well, I mean, they're all kind of under the side hustle umbrella at this point. After selling the VA site, that was my primary other brand or project. But all of the above, it's having conversations with other people, tend to get a lot of energy from meetups and other events for entrepreneurs, conferences, where you just everybody is kind of in that same space, and they kind of get you, which you, at least in my case, don't get a lot from like my local friends and family network. Some people are getting on board with it, but really going to a high concentration of online business owners, entrepreneurs, kind of definitely gets the creative juices flowing. And then it was in the shower the other day. It was like, I really struggle with short form content, and I see people always like, they're going viral on Twitter for these like witty comments or like pretty concise threads, where it's same thing on TikTok, like these really creative, funny short form videos. It's like, my wheelhouse is a 45-minute podcast episode or like a 3,000 word blog post. Like short form is a foreign language to me.
Yeah.
But one of the ideas was, a couple of years ago, I created like these 1 minute micro podcast. I built it for Alexa, and it was like this Alexa skill, the money making minute. And it's like, I still have all of those somewhere on some hard drive somewhere. It's like, maybe I could repurpose those to TikTok or YouTube shorts or do something with that content. So that was my shower thought from the other day.
I think that that's a great idea. Yeah, you need to spend some time in the shower, because repurposing content is always a great idea, because if you had that good information at one time, I think sometimes it just gets buried on our computers and we forget that we have it. Or
Yes.
have you ever written something and you look back at it later and you're like, wow, that's really good. I can't believe I wrote that. I don't remember writing it.
Very fondly. There's like, and I've had to delete, a bunch of that type of content from the blog just because it's, not getting any search traffic. It's, maybe somewhat confusing to the Google algorithm. What is this site all about? Like, so it's like, okay, I have this like archive document that's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of pages long on, all of the old blog posts that I wrote at one time. And I'm sure I thought were very clever. And it's like, oh, so witty and so insightful. And it's like, and no one is ever going to see this stuff. So kind of painful to kill your darlings in Stephen King's language. But
yes, that's very true. Yeah. But you're a good writer. I mean, I enjoy reading your blog. So good for you. So if you had top 3 tips that you'd give somebody who wants to wean themselves off of their corporate job and start something different, what would that be?
Oh my goodness, top 3 tips. Maybe the first thing is to start with a pain point and go out and try and find a solution for that, or go sell a solution for that. And that may take, in terms of businesses, like that usually takes one of 3 forms, either service, product, or content. And so maybe we'll give the example of like cleaning houses, or a dirty house is maybe the pain. And so there are certain, you can go hire a cleaning service to take care of that problem for you. You can buy cleaning products, the latest organic spray or the latest Swiffer mop, or like a Roomba robot. I need a Lego proof Roomba. And so there's the products that you can buy to take care of that pain. And then there's the content that addresses that pain. It's like the decluttering videos, the Marie Kondo books, the people who address it from the content standpoint. And I think you can look at almost any pain or problem under that same framework. And maybe it's something that you've overcome in your own life, and there's opportunity to go help other people with that, or just from conversations with friends. So I would call that kind of like building the what sucks list, which is normally try and be more optimistic, but got to put on your pessimist hat and just take it. I just use the notes app on my phone and say, well, what sucks? What are people complaining to me about? What is annoying and frustrating to me? And kind of keeping your eyes open for that kind of thing. So that'd probably be number 1. Start with the pain. Number 2, like think of it as an experiment. I think a lot of people put the pressure on themselves to, all right, this is it. I'm going all in. Whereas I tend to, you think more like the side hustle scientist. Like, okay, this is my hypothesis that maybe this is a pain point for other people, and maybe people will pay me to solve it. So I'm going to go and put my best effort toward that. But if the experiment blows up in my face, like, okay, hypothesis disproved, like, going on to the next thing, versus, I am such a failure. This is never going to work. I don't know. And then maybe the third thing is to have your end goal in mind. And because which side hustle you choose often depends on where do you want to go. You had people who are perfectly happy with, being a Lyft driver, like plug and play side hustle. When I want to make money, I turn on the app, as one of my drivers in Chicago told me. It's like, makes perfect sense. But limited upside, your hours are capped, or your dollars are capped by how many hours you can put in. And so trying to think down the road, okay, if this hits 2, 3, 4, 5 years from now, what does success look like? And how can I position myself today to kind of steer toward that, that end goal picture? I think trying to be conscious of that, like building something with, hopefully a little bit of scale, hopefully a little bit of margin, that doesn't end up being a trap in the freelancer trap sense of the word.
Right. Oh, that's great ideas here. So find your pain and then find a solution to that. Think of it as an experiment, and also have your end goal in mind. Yeah, that's brilliant. Did you think that you'd be doing this when you were a kid? I mean, were you the guy who had a newspaper route and
I
lemonade
mean,
stands?
I was the kid. I was like trying to sell baseball cards at the end of the driveway to my equally broke, friends and neighbors.
Yeah.
Like, not a great business model. I had some fun selling candy from Costco at Boy Scout summer camp. It was relatively easy to undercut the general store, the trading post there, but it was limited by like how much could you fit in your backpack. You still got to carry all this other stuff.
Yeah.
But had really no idea. I was interested in marketing and media from an early age, but none of this stuff really existed back then. And so it's kind of, it is interesting. I shadowed somebody who was like the sports director or sports producer for one of the local TV stations in college or in high school. Actually, we had job shadow day.
That's a great idea.
And it didn't really hit me until like years later. It's like, okay, I was talking with some friends and they're like, oh, but you're kind of in media now. So maybe it was a relevant job shadow. Like, oh, I didn't really think about that. But yeah, it's just, you kind of see where the ball takes you. And somebody on the podcast years ago said, look, the best opportunities become visible once you're in motion. And at the time, it's 2014, like I almost dismissed that as hippy dippy advice. Like, really, like it sounds nice, but is that really true? Since then, 100% true, right? Like it's the conversations that you have, it's the connections that you make, all these creative ideas that start to come to you as you're in the game, right? It's hard to, manage things from the sidelines and hypothesize, but once you're playing and once you kind of figure out what works, what doesn't work, other good things start to happen. And that's definitely what I found.
Yeah. In the end, then you end up having something that's much greater than what you probably envisioned in the very beginning.
Yes.
Yeah. Baby steps every day. In fact, a couple of our speakers have also talked about taking inspired action every day. And I think that's part of that whole idea that you have of listing the 3 things that are important to you to do. So do you find that at the end of the day, you have done those 3 things?
If I have, it's definitely a win. It's rare. And maybe
but you have a focus. Yeah.
But sometimes I need to like, break those apart into, smaller chunks. And maybe that's a lesson in itself is, okay, if I didn't get that done, why? Like maybe there's a way to, deconstruct that in a way where it's like, okay, I can do part 1, I can do part 2 versus, you mentioned writing a book and, blocking off social media and having the uninterrupted block of time to do it. But I find I have much more success on big projects like that if I really, really break it down into like its most granular detail. Like, okay, outline chapter 1, or, do the research for chapter 2, like, kind of break it apart versus, write book. Like, okay, here we go.
No, totally. Yeah. I mean, you can have a big goal, but you can talk yourself right out of it if you make it too big. So I totally get that. Yeah. You have to have step-by-step, baby steps every day. So do you want to talk to people about your books? I have the 2 of them
look at that.
here. Yeah. Great products. And you want to talk about your free gift?
I forget, what did I put as?
Yeah, you were going to offer the $1,000, 100 ways, and the workbook that goes with it.
Perfect. There it is.
It's a great idea, wasn't it?
Yes. And I had a landing page for that and everything. Let me dig that up.
No pressure. I mean, if you just want to leave it in, we can put it in the notes as well. So.
It was some acronym based on the title of the summit. I can remember that.
Oh, well, not to worry about it. Just tell us a little bit more about the book. What will people learn from it?
Absolutely. So 1K 100 Ways was an opportunity to showcase all of the creative and inspiring efforts that are going on inside of Side Hustle Nation. So it was really a crowdsourced effort of what's everybody else working on? Yeah. What worked for them? It's kind of told in parallel, where everybody has their own page or their own profile where they answer the same set of questions. How did you come up with that idea? How did you get your first customers? How much did it cost to get started? How are you marketing this thing? What would you do differently? Like, what mistakes have you made along the way? And that way you could really kind of compare apples to apples and see, some of the common threads, but also, okay, what did people do differently for different businesses? And it was a ton of fun to put together and to really involve a lot of members of the community in a new book project.
It had to have been a nightmare combining all that information. So I give you a lot of credit for sifting through all those surveys.
I thought we talk about how the sausage is made for a minute. I thought this was going to be the easiest book project in the world. Oh. Throw up a Google form, and people will submit their answers and just mash it all together into a Word doc. Maybe spend a couple of weeks formatting. It'll be great. And we found where some people gave us 1,500 words. Like, great, lots of detail. Other people came back with 150 words. You're like, that sounds interesting, but what else you got? How did you market your business? Instagram. Like, what specifically did you do on Instagram? And, so there was a lot of back and forth, and I'd already committed to the 100 ways title. So we get back with well, I got 87 good ones. And, well, now I got to find 13 more stories. Let me go back to the drawing board. It was definitely a bigger challenge than I anticipated, but I think it was fun. It's been rewarding to see the result and the feedback that's gotten so far.
The other thing that's cool about it is the details that each person gives are vastly different. So you're going to get a lot of information about different apps that you can use and different processes and different websites, which I found really useful because it's like one-stop shopping for if you want to start some brainstorming, I think.
Yes. And I would love to give your audience a free copy, so you don't have to go to Amazon for it. I'll send one over to you. It's sidehustlenation.com/FYP bonus for Find Your Purpose bonus, FYP bonus. So Great. That will get that directly to you along with the companion workbook to hopefully start generating some ideas for yourself.
That's wonderful. And also I'm going to be putting some bonus content at YouTube, which is how I used your books to come up with 30 ideas to get busy in the next 30 days. So cool. Yeah, I mean, I think that's one thing as an author, you don't ever really get to hear how people are using what you put out there in the world. And I think that when you wrote that book, at least you got some feedback that people were listening to what you were saying and they were actually doing something with it.
That's some of the most rewarding, emails and conversations that I have. You meet people at events who say, I made $1,000 last month selling print on demand t-shirts based on your episode from 5 or 6 years ago. Like, that's all super. Or I started a blog after listening to, what Rosemary Groner told you. And like, oh, okay. I love hearing that stuff, and definitely is inspiring and motivating to keep going. And then it's kind of becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy or self-fulfilling content engine in that way. It was like, well, let's come on and tell your story. And then, you inspire the next generation of people doing it.
Right. And everybody's different. So it's great that there are different ideas that resonate with each person. So for sure. That's good. Is there anything else you want to leave us with? A favorite story from when you were 12 as an entrepreneur, or ways that you got your family involved in what you do?
I'm trying to get the kids involved a little bit more. My oldest has started to become, we're very interested in money because, money is the source of Legos. So he's like, what does daddy do? He makes a few cameo appearances, like at the very end of podcast episodes, where we did one right before the holidays on NFTs. And so we're looking at, okay, what does NFT stand for? And he's, making up acronyms, and we're looking at these, $150,000 Bored Ape JPEGs. And he's like, this is a picture of a monkey, which one do you like? So he's trying to get him involved in some way, but it's encouraging to try and think and stressful in a way, because I think that was something that definitely stressed me out as a kid of like, well, how are you going to support yourself? Like, that's a lot of pressure. The traditional paths, let's go get a job, but that's one way to do it, but there's all this other. So it'll be, if the show is still going, when he's, a little bit older, we'll have some examples of that. mean, I met this guy and his son who was on the show recently, who he just started letting people hold his like tarantula and his scorpion. And now he's doing like birthday parties and events where he's talking
Oh,
about how
wow.
cool these animals are,
Uh-huh.
and collecting tips out on the boardwalk. I'll overcome your fear, take a picture with the tarantula. It's like making a couple $100 a day in tips as a 13-year-old. I forget how old he was, but
Yeah.
it was really inspiring. And it was cool to have connected with him even a couple years prior to that at some Side Hustle Nation meetup. So inspiring the next generation is a daunting task, but hopefully something that I get to stick around long enough to do.
Definitely. Well, even if you decide not to do the podcast forever and ever, your kids have definitely been influenced by everything that you do. And so would you advise them to go work for a corporation or to do a gig on their own?
Hopefully they'll have some opportunity for a taste of entrepreneurship early on. And I mean, that was my path. Like, go get a job. That's what you're supposed to do.
Yeah.
And it's maybe not the only path, but it was the one that I took. So hopefully I mean, the bigger thing is kind of understanding the financial ground game, where, the most important metric isn't how much you make, it's how much you keep. And there's a ton of different ways to improve that, personal profitability. So we're definitely looking forward to the challenge of teaching that to both the boys as they age into money and finance a little bit more.
Well, good luck. What a wonderful role model you've been to them. And thank you for all the service that you've given to everyone who's out there trying to make ends meet. We really appreciate you and your podcast.
You bet. Thank you.
Yeah, so thanks for being with us, and we'll look forward to seeing you in the future in my pocket on your podcast.
Thanks, Barbara.
All right. I'm going to end this here then.